There are lots of different ways in which I get video ideas for this channel. Oftentimes it's if a suggestion gets a lot of likes in the comments section of a video, sometimes I'll spot a tweet one of you has sent me, and occasionally I'll get a suggestion from a friend, such as my recent Mesut Ozil video, that I think is worth a go. Heck, every now and then, usually when I'm in the shower, I even come up with a video idea all of my own. Today's video idea came from my dad though, which is, I believe, a first in this, my 1050 something video, who texted me last Friday morning asking me if I'd ever made a video about players who have had the most loan moves, and if so, who came out on top. I hadn't made that video, but I decided that I would. So I have scoured the interweb and tallied up the loan moves of every serial loanee that I could think of, in addition to asking for some of your suggestions on Twitter, and I've ended up with 7 players who have certainly had plenty of loan moves. Despite my best efforts, I would be very surprised if these were actually the top 7, since I suspect there are 1 or 2 obscure shouts that even my fail-safe research methods may have missed out on. If that's the case, which I'm near certain it is, and you spot one, feel free to let me know about it in the comments. Without further ado then, courtesy of my big-eared former punk of a father who now spends his time going on leisurely walks and on grandad duties with my nephew, here are the 7 players that I could find who have had the most loan moves. Andros Townsend. Starting in 7th, which is usually how things work in these lists, we begin with a man who I've always thought of as being synonymous with loan moves. Born in Leytonstone, Andros Townsend joined the Tottenham Hotspur Academy at the age of 8. A decade later, at the age of 18 of course, the teenager went out on loan for the first time to Yeovil Town. Townsend made 10 appearances on the South Coast for the then League One side, followed by 2 further League One loan moves to Leyton Orient and MK Dons. As you might expect, Townsend then graduated to Championship loans, of which there were 5 within the space of just 2 seasons. Townsend spent brief stints at Ipswich, Watford, Millwall, Leeds and Birmingham at a time when he was still starring for England's under-21s. Townsend's final loan move, to date at least, at his only temporary stint at a Premier League team came in 2012-13, when he spent a single season on loan at Queen's Park Rangers. Townsend spent the next 2 seasons fighting for a spot in the Tottenham team and even broke into the England squad, before joining Newcastle United on a permanent basis. In his half-season at St James's Park, Newcastle were relegated and Townsend joined Crystal Palace, where he has remained ever since. All told, the 29-year-old has been out on loan 9 times, and somewhat unusually for a serial loanee, he has never joined the same team on loan twice. Gael Kakuta. If you thought that Chelsea players might be a regular feature in this 7, then I could tell you that you were not mistaken, and they featured even more heavily on my shortlist. Gael Kakuta spent 8 years contracted to the Blues and 6 seasons as a senior professional, yet he only registered 16 first-team appearances, 12 of which came in a single season. Those figures suggest that he spent a fair amount of time away from Stamford Bridge, and indeed he did. A man with a huge reputation in France's youth ranks ever since his time in the academy at Lens, unlike Townsend, Kakuta never had to go down the lower league loan route. Every one of his loan moves has been at a top-flight team, starting with Fulham in the Premier League in January 2011 when he was aged only 19. Stints at Bolton, Dijon, Vitesse, Lazio and Rayo Vallecano followed, but with Kakuta sadly having failed to live up to some of Chelsea's early expectations, he was sold to Sevilla in 2015, and then again to Hebei China Fortune in 2016. Kakuta twice went out on loan whilst contracted to the Chinese Super League side, to Deportivo La Coruña and Amiens. The 29-year-old is now actually contracted to Amiens on a permanent basis, but once again, he finds himself out on loan with his first club Lens, the 9th loan move of his career to date, and it must be said that he has made an excellent start to the season there. Delac. Staying at Stamford Bridge for now, to the surprise of absolutely nobody, 5th place brings us to Delac, who is one of a handful of goalkeepers to have found themselves playing for a new team virtually every season for a number of years. Delac actually agreed to join Chelsea back in the summer of 2009 when he just turned 17, but he didn't officially become a Chelsea player until January 2011. He was immediately sent out on loan to Chelsea's old pals Vitesse Arnhem in the Netherlands before beginning a globetrotting series of loans around Europe. Delac had stints in the Czech Republic, Portugal, Croatia, Serbia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, France, and finally Belgium. In Delac's first 4 loan moves, he made a combined total of only 6 appearances, which you might think rather undermines the primary purpose of going out on loan. It was with Sarajevo in the Bosnian Premier League that Delac played the majority of his football out on loan, spending 2 seasons with the club in 2 separate loan moves. The 28-year-old only left Chelsea officially in 2018, but across the best part of a decade contracted to the club, he failed to register a single first-team appearance. Delac had 9 separate loan moves, but he played for 10 different clubs on loan by virtue of dropping into Vitoria's second team whilst playing in Portugal. Samuele Longo. The Italians love a loan move, and of the players that slip through the cracks of my research, I suspect a handful are Italians, or have been contracted to an Italian club at some stage at least. One man who doesn't miss out is Samuele Longo though, who only broke his never-ending chain of loan moves in 2020. Longo is a native of the Italian town of Valdobbiadene, a region renowned for its Prosecco production, deep in Italian wine country. He joined Inter Milan as a 17-year-old and, slightly unusually, his first 2 loan moves came whilst he was still an academy player. Longo had temporary stints at Piacenza and Genoa where he played reserve team football before he began his myriad of loan moves in the professional game. Longo, who only ever made 2 appearances for Inter during a decade contracted to the club, went out on loan to Espanyol, Verona, Rayo Vallecano, Cagliari, Frosinone, Girona, Tenerife, Huesca, Cremonese, Deportivo La Coruña and Venezia. As you can tell, the 6'1" striker has been around a bit, and by far his 2 best loan moves were to Girona and Tenerife in the Spanish Segunda Division. He brought an end to his cyclob loan moves in the summer just gone, joining Serie B new boys Vicenza. The 29-year-old has had 13 loan moves in total, albeit 2 came whilst he was still playing youth team football. David Stockdale. I've noticed 1 or 2 jokes in recent weeks cropping up in the comments accusing me of shoehorning Hull City into videos, a quite frankly scandalous accusation which, unless retracted, will leave me with no other option but to start promoting my book on here once again. Anyhow, I cannot help but mention the mighty Tigers, East Yorkshire's finest, in the context of David Stockdale since he made not 1 but 2 loan moves to the KCOM Stadium, or the Casey Stadium as it was then. Stockdale hails from Leeds and he kick-started his career with York City, with loan moves at non-league teams Wakefield FC and Worksop Town, the first of whom no longer exist. After he broke through at York, aged only 19, Stockdale joined Darlington before he was snapped up by Premier League side Fulham for a potential £600,000. A string of loan moves followed to Rotherham United, Leicester City, Plymouth Argyle, Ipswich Town and Hull City ×2 before Stockdale joined Brighton and Hove Albion on a permanent basis. Stockdale won promotion to the Premier League at Brighton, just as he had done at Hull City, and even made the Championship team of the season. But that didn't stop Brighton from selling him to Birmingham City and bringing current Arsenal loanee Matt Ryan instead. Stockdale spent a season at St Andrews as the Blues' number 1 before being replaced again, thus kick-starting the second string of loan moves of his career to date. Southend United, Wycombe Wanderers, Coventry City and then Wycombe again took Stockdale up to an incredible tally of 12 career loan moves, before he finally joined Wycombe on a permanent basis before the start of this season following their promotion to the Championship. David Button. It's yet another goalkeeper in second place, and it's another man who can name both Fulham and Brighton among his list of former employers. A man who has had more loans than Lloyds Bank, and yes, I'm ashamed of that joke, and not sure why I had to make it now having held off for this long. None of Button's 13 loan moves came whilst he was contracted to either of those teams. In fact, all 13 came during a 4-year period in which Button was contracted to Tottenham. That's right, 13 loan moves in the space of 4 years, an average of 3.25 loan moves per season. As far as I'm aware, and as always, I'm all too happy to be corrected in the comments, that means that Button holds the record for having been loaned out the most times by a single club. Whilst contracted to Tottenham, Button was sent out on loan to Grays Athletic, Rochdale, Grays Athletic again, Bournemouth, Luton Town, Dagenham and Redbridge, Crewe Alexandra, Crewe again, Shrewsbury Town, Plymouth Argyle, Leyton Orient, Doncaster Rovers and Barnsley. Christ, feels like I've just listed half of the Football League. Button eventually signed for Charlton Athletic, then Brentford, then Fulham, followed by Brighton, and most recently he joined West Bromwich Albion as Sam Johnson's deputy. And he also has the proud distinction of being the number 2 in my fantasy Premier League team. You'll no doubt be fascinated to discover. Honourable mentions. I'm not sure how honourable it is to be sent out on loan a lot of times, but I suppose it isn't particularly dishonourable either. Anyhow, I must admit that the first 2 inclusions in this 7 were a tad fortunate, since there are in fact at least 11 players that I'm aware of that have been sent out on loan 9 times, which is the same number as Andros Townsend and Gael Kakuta, and there are likely a number of others out there. They include Conrad Logan, Ryan Bertrand, Jaden Stockley, Freddie Lapido, Tom Anderson, John Marcus, Marcelo Trotter, Theo Robinson, Nathan Tyson, and, if you are to include players who played for reserve teams as 2 separate loan moves, Joel Campbell as well. There are too many players on 8 or 7 loans that my research, along with some of your Twitter suggestions, threw up for me to mention them all, but I just wanted to clarify those who've had 9 given the first 2 inclusions. Before we come to top spot, feel free to hit the like button if you enjoyed today's video, and go ahead and subscribe to the channel if you don't already. And even if you think you do, it's worth double checking, because some people think they're subscribed, but it turns out they weren't, and it breaks my heart to think that anyone could miss out on the world-class content that I'm putting out free of charge on a regular basis. Anyhow, top spot, here we go. Michael Hector. When my old man first texted me with his inquiry, I told him that I wasn't sure, but Michael Hector must be up there. And well, unless any of you know better, I think I might have pulled it out of the bag right off the bat, exhibiting, once and for all, that my football knowledge really is peerless, and that he texts the right man. I'm going to be raging, by the way, when one of you tells me about a 27-year-old left-back from Brescia who's had 18 loan moves in Italy's 8th tier. Anyhow, Hector is my man for the time being, and interestingly enough, despite having been one of Chelsea's many serial loanees, the majority of Hector's loan moves didn't actually come whilst he was contracted to the Blues. The Newham native, who represents Jamaica at international level, began his professional career with Reading. The Royals sent him out on loan a whopping 11 times, with 5 loan moves to non-league teams, 3 to League 2 teams, 1 to a League 1 team, 1 to Scotland, and 1 to the Republic of Ireland. Hector then made a £4 million move to Chelsea, where he spent 4 years and failed to register a single appearance. Chelsea first loaned Hector back out to Reading, then to Eintracht Frankfurt, followed by, yes you guessed it, Hull City, and finally Sheffield Wednesday, taking Michael Hector's total tally of loan moves up to 15. Hector joined fellow West Londoners Fulham last season, where he won promotion in his debut campaign, and he hasn't yet been loaned out by the Cottagers. So that is it for today's video, but thank you all as ever for watching. Give us a like if you enjoyed it, let me know your thoughts down below in the comments, and make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications for HITC Sevens. Oh, and you can also find me on Twitter or Instagram, should you feel so inclined, via the username @HITC Sevens on both.